watching NotesIn9.
Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9. I'm David Leedy. Episode 87, XPages Custom REST Control. Tired of developing? Get some rest. Okay, just a couple quick NotesIn9 updates before we get on to the meat of the show. Recently, I was on the Taking Notes podcast. That's a great podcast done by Bruce Algor and Julian Robichaux. They've been doing it for forever. It's certainly the longest-running podcast in our little world, and probably one of the longer ones in the outside world as well. And they had a couple surprise guests on for me. Paul Calhoun and Dr. Marky Roden were on to help facilitate things, and we talked about all things NotesIn9, basically, about how I got started doing it back in 2009, what it takes to become a contributor. So if you ever want to be a contributor, that might be a good place to start and listen to, see if you're interested in that. Just about the whole gambit. So I wanted to thank them very much, Bruce and Julian and Paul and Marky, for their interest and their help and support throughout that podcast and just NotesIn9 in general. So that does mean a lot to me, and I appreciate it. And what does that support get us? Well, we're up to 150,000 downloads. I think Friday it hit. So that's, I think, pretty good number for XPages, since it's mostly an XPages screencast so far. So I'm very happy about that. And we're going to keep going. And I want to thank all my contributors and everybody else who's helped make that happen. And I want to thank you for watching. So hopefully there'll be a lot of good shows left to come. Okay, so speaking of good, I'm going to talk about great. And Bryan Morris returning to the show. Bryan Morris is a past contributor, and he's done a couple great shows for us on iText and generating PDFs and stuff like that. And he's recently spoke at MWLUG in Pittsburgh, and here's his contact information. And what's going to happen here is he's going to talk about getting started with this REST XPages custom control. So with that being said, let's go over to Bryan.
Thank you, David. One of the things we've gotten recently is the Domino Data Service, and this allows us to access information in documents and views directly using REST. In addition to this, the OpenNTF extension library has a couple of RESTful custom controls that we can use. Now, REST stands for Representational State Transfer, and it uses the principles of REST over HTTP. This can be very useful. We can see documents, we can see views directly out of the NSF using JSON, which is a bit lighter weight than XML. I was excited to be able to use these because I've been doing some work with iPads and they work with REST. However, what I wanted to do was a little bit more complex than the great stuff that we have that comes directly out of the box. So what I did is I got into using the custom REST control out of the extension library. There's not a lot of documentation out there on this, so I had to do some research on my own. And so now what I'd like to do is share what I found, and maybe you'll find it useful. So first, let's look at the X page that we have with our REST control in it. So this is a simple X page. It's got one REST control in it. And if we look at these, drag a new one over so we can look at it. It's very simple. We have an ID we put in there, or that is put in for us. The important part is the path info. When the URL is created for the REST service, it needs a path info for the URL to identify the REST service on the X page. So we would give it the REST service name, there. Then we have a couple of different types that we can choose. And here are the types that we have in there. A couple of them are pre-formatted and are pretty much plug and play, such as the view collection and the document collection. So you can put those in and they will do their thing for you pretty much automatically. We're going to use the custom REST service to allow us more variation on what we're allowed to do. You can select a couple of content types of what is going to be coming in. And you can tell it what to do for a delete, a get, a post, a put, all of which have different methods in this HTTP REST service. One of the things that's also very important is the REST var. So the REST var is, or the request var is the part that the information that you get in from the REST control, from the REST service, turns into a variable that you can then use to manipulate. So if you want to do something with the information you get in, which of course is the point, you need to be able to get a handle on that, and this is what the request var does. I've been calling mine JWA. So this is how you set up a REST service. So let's go ahead and get rid of this one and take a look at the one we actually have. This is a custom REST service, like I said, and the rest is in here. And most of the work, all the work, I'm only having it do something for post. So let's go ahead and look at the code I have in post. And this is a very simple set of code because I'm passing everything onto a script library to do the work. Here is the JWA, which is the request var that we've got. So this is our variable, and I'm using the JavaScript function eval to process it. So I'm going to create it takes what we get in from the REST service, and eval will turn it into an array that we can use. So I've got this array that I've got here that I'm calling array of objects, and then I'm going to pass it to my function, which is called RESTDoc. And so this will take and do whatever we want with all the information we get in from the REST service. So let's take a look at this function now. And this is a server-side JavaScript library. And what I'm going to do here is I'm creating a log, and I'm going through and going to iterate through all the objects in the array, which is what you see here. And then I'm going to use the variable object to deal with just the object that we're getting from this iteration through this array. Now, the first one I'm going to do will have a unit, so I'm going to update a document. Because I'm customizing this one, I can do more than just patch or put. I can do more than just work on one document. I can work on several. So if I get a unit, and when you look for a unit in a database, when you get a document by unit, you have to put it into a try. It won't return a null or nothing or something else like that. You do a try, and if it doesn't work in that try, you can do something in your catch, which is what we'll see in just a moment. But for each of the nodes that I have in the object that I get, I can do something. And so here, where we've done a replace item value, I'll get the object customer number and put it in the customer number field using replace item value. Looking for whether or not we can do this, I'm looking for not only undefined but also null, because it seems that JavaScript will return one of these. If it's not there, it will be undefined, but I also don't want to do anything if it's null. So we can do a variety of these. I've got a couple of values that are going to go into a replace item value based on what we have in that node. If the try doesn't work, I'm going to do a function called create new doc. So we have a create new doc. This is again very similar to what we have. We're going to do a database, and we're going to create a new document. We're going to give it a form name, and then I'm going to go and do the exact same thing using replace item document. So this is the script, which as you can see is very similar to what we're doing, all the way down to a save that is going to return our document. And we can put in whatever we want for our return string, because I'm creating this return string that it will return, so I have something coming back from the REST. Now, let's look at the script that I'm going to be using, and this is a very simple JSON that it's done in an array, as you can see inside these square brackets, and there are two objects inside of this, and each of these have a couple of other objects or nodes. This is a lighter version than XML, so if you're used to processing XML, it's very similar to that. The format's different, but you have your node name and then the node value. This is a multi-value array, so when I go ahead and put in requests, as you can see here with requested items, we will have a multi-value response. So this will create a multi-value field value inside of it simply by putting this into the object. Now let's go ahead and copy this and take a look at the JSON. Now the first thing I want to do is put this into JSON lint, which is a website out there that will tell you whether or not this is valid JSON. If you do not have valid JSON, your REST service is not going to work. As you can see, this is valid. If I made a change to it, just take something out like that, it's no longer going to be valid. It's going to give me an idea of what I need to work on. So this has been a great help, as I've made sure that what I'm getting in is actually something that the REST service can deal with. Firefox also has an extension called the REST client, which we can use to process this REST that we're going to do. So I'm going to favorite in here, and you can see here that the URL is very similar to what we're used to. We've got the full URL, we've got the NSF name, and then we've got the XPage name with this XSP extension. And here is the REST service path info name, and this is part of what we are required to do when we create a REST service. And this tells the HTTP service that it's looking for this particular path, which is a REST service, inside the XPage. So in some ways it's similar to when you were pulling out a particular item or a file or an attachment using old classic notes, but it's for the REST service. And we're also going to change this into, as you can see, the REST client allows us a couple of options. We're going to do a post because that is what I've coded this REST service to do. After that, I'm just going to put this body in here. This is the JSON that we just validated. And then we can go ahead and hit send. Now, what I'm going to do first to show you is I'm just going to take this out. So now again, this is invalid JSON. And I'm going to hit send. And when we do this, we're going to get a bad request. So we've got a status code of bad request because this is improper. And if we look here under the response, the raw response, we can see that we got an error rendering the service. And if we look down, we can see that there was an error parsing. A number of the errors that you may have as you work on a REST service will appear here and will give you an idea of what to look for. So let's go ahead and fix this. And so we've got our valid JSON again. Put our response header over. We're going to hit send, and as you can see, this went through very quickly, and we've got a 200 OK, which means that it went ahead and processed. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happened to it now. Now, this is our NSF before we did anything. So as you can see here, there's a single document, and there's nothing in it. So it's very empty. Looks like there's a value in request, but there's no values in any of the fields. We do have the unit, which I put in there to find. And there's just this one document here. When we go ahead and do this, what we see is we now have two values in here, and these are the values that we had in our JSON. The first one, this is the one that we had a moment ago, as you can see from the unit, because I'm sure everybody memorized this. I certainly didn't. But it is filled in the values that we had from the JSON. In our next one, this was a completely new document that was created telling us that there was no date found in this one, and it still has a multi-value field. So the custom REST service allows you to do a great number of things with JSON and the HTTP service for REST. You can use a couple of different options with this. The custom service allows you to use post and put, where for the standard ones or the Domino data service you can't use post, you have to use put, or patch, which is something similar, and we may cover at some other point. But this is a very useful way of communicating with things, particularly with something like an iOS device.
And that's the demo. I thank Bryan for coming back on the show and providing that for us. I really appreciate that. And if you have any questions for me, here's my contact information, and I thank you for your time.